we're live. I guess we can start with Paulette. Maybe you can give a introduction first, since you are a special guest this week.
Great, thank you. I have a background that's kind of mixed. So I came to the Bay from Canada to get married, and I ended up going to the same boot camp as Sam back in 2013. A little bit of my background: I used to work as a counselor and a coach, and owned a yoga studio for a couple of years and taught full time before I became a software engineer. So I have a really different pre-life to my engineering life. When I went to Dev Bootcamp, for that reason, I found it incredibly difficult to get to the program, and it took me a little longer than some of my colleagues. But I did, and so then I got my first job out of Dev Bootcamp a couple months later, and then I transferred into a second job, which I'm currently at, and worked my way kind of up the rung of positions, and now I'm the director of engineering at a company called Mavenlink in San Francisco.
Okay, Brady, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm not sure if anyone new is here today, but I'll give my background anyway. And honestly, I'm not sure if I've ever talked about how I also had a very alternative background coming in. I knew, well, maybe I've said that I knew that I liked learning languages. I majored in Spanish and I minored in Italian. And then after college, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I moved to Vienna, Austria, and I learned German. And eventually, years later, I moved back to the United States and started to realize that because learning computer languages was learning spoken languages was so fun, and I decided to try learning computer languages too. So eventually went on to also Dev Bootcamp, but in Chicago, and a couple of years later. And after graduating Dev Bootcamp, started working at a company called Trunk Club here in Chicago. And at that point, they were already owned by Nordstrom. Nordstrom purchased them, I believe, in 2014. And just a couple of weeks before things really shut down in Chicago for coronavirus, Nordstrom announced that they were going to really absorb Trunk Club into the Nordstrom company a little bit more. So I should continue working for the same group, the same team that helps onboard people as our customers. I do a lot of front end, but I'm really full stack. And I've been on this specific team for almost a year. It'll be a year, July 1st. So that's me. And go on, Sam.
Awesome. I'm Sam. I'm a front-end engineer at Lyft right now. Work on internal tools for the mapping organization. Yeah, I took a long path to get to where I am. I told my story. I've told it at boot camps. I give talks at boot camps sometimes. Last one I did was at Rhythm School. So the short story is I graduated during the dot-com bust, computer science degree in Hawaii. Gave up looking for a job after like 6 months. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. But maybe not, because I took a long journey to get here, and maybe that whole journey was necessary. It was a fun journey too. I went into the mortgage industry instead. Somehow I landed in that industry. Exploded 2008. Joined the Peace Corps. Went to West Africa for 3 years. Lived in Togo and Burkina Faso. Taught people how to use computers. While I was sitting in the desert, I somehow had slow internet connection once in a while. And I read an article on TechCrunch about Dev Bootcamp. Came back and I was like, I got to get into this place. I applied, got in, went to the bootcamp. After the bootcamp, tried to start a startup with a friend. Then that didn't pan out. Then did contract work for a little while until I got my first full-time job, which is not until like a year after the bootcamp. And then went to a bigger company after that, and another company after that, and now I'm at Lyft. So that's the short version, but I took a really long path to get here. So yeah, maybe if people have questions about that, we can answer later. But just for the people who just popped in, we have a Slido if you want to ask questions. It's easier if we put it in a Slido because people can upvote it. But since there's not that many people here, maybe we can just either just say questions live on video if you're fine with that, or just in the chat. But maybe I can kick it off. Paulette, I was wondering if you could just maybe give us like a short version of how you went from being a junior engineer to becoming director of engineering in just 7 years, or 7 years around there.
Yeah. Okay. One thing that so I started off at the Jelly Belly Candy Company. I was a front-end junior engineer working on their e-commerce platform. It was a really small team of engineers. It was hard to learn there, but it was also because it was their process was really different than what I'm used to now. But I was forced to learn a lot in that environment, and I had a lot of space to just continue working on my front-end skills. So I did that for 9 months. You know, they helped me. And then I was recruited by my current company, and it was, you know, closer to home and great. And I was really, I feel like I was pulled up by a lot of the engineers there who were already, the process was it was a startup company at the time. I was the 63rd employee, but the engineers who had built the platform at that point had already put in some really strong engineering process that I got to kind of anchor in. And so with that, I started off as the junior engineer who owned the marketing website, which was a small Rails app. And it was awesome because now I had this whole application that was all mine. We had a small database, and I had to rebuild it twice. So like from scratch, basically making it, you know, responsive and all these fun things. And I learned just a ton by working in this small Rails app. I also, one of the reasons I think I got hired at Jelly Belly is I built an application for a project at Dev Bootcamp, and we actually used that. I used that moving forward I still use it with a nonprofit in the Bay here, Brighter Beginnings. So we built it for Dev Bootcamp, but I continued to fix it and upgrade it over the years. So I also built my skills that way. I would say that I was on the junior role for a year, and then I transitioned into working on the core product, always kind of as a junior for like the first year, I would say, and gradually built my skills. So by, I think, the third year I was there, I was securely a mid-level engineer. You know, a year later, they moved me into working on harder things. So I grew really, I feel like I grew slowly technically, but what I didn't give myself enough credit for when I went into engineering was the background I came with. And I was really thrown off. I mean, Sam probably remembers how incredibly difficult the first month of Dev Bootcamp was for me. It like tossed me around because I came with like confidence and, you know, certain like excitement and that I could just achieve this thing. And I was blown away by how hard it was. And I doubted myself for a long time. And I had this imposter syndrome that just haunted me for the first few years in my career. Fortunately, at MavenLink, we do something called coaching. We actually call our managers coaches. And I came with a coaching background. So they put me to work helping them build like our management team. And so eventually, like, I got to work more and more with people, and I didn't stop. I don't actually do engineering now on a full-time basis. I rarely get to write code, which frightens me a little bit based on how hard it was to develop those skills. However, I'm choosing to trust that, you know, it's all going to unfold okay. So as soon as I sort of started taking the reins of the coaching work, and they moved me into an engineering manager position. So I was still coding, but not as often. And they also started giving me teams to run. So I was the team lead of a couple different teams. That sort of put me in this position where now I have direct reports, and I also have these teams whose their work is I'm responsible for. And one of the great things about MavenLink is you don't have to be a team lead who has all of the strength technically. We have a great team, and we shared a lot of the challenges on the team. And so I just was able to continue growing in both my technical abilities and my people management skills to the point where it made sense to put me in a director role, because I had my hands in so many different pieces of the puzzle at the company. Yeah.
Awesome. And How did you end up getting your first job at Jelly Belly? Like, how did that come about? Did you cold apply or?
Yeah, I just applied when the position was open. And when I went in for the interview, I think I got the job because of the app that I built. Like that's my gut instinct. And they said like I didn't have a ton of experience, but I was able to open up an application, show them what I had written, do all of that. So I really credit the effort I'd put into reaching out to Brighter Beginnings, talking with their heads of staff, and like basically building them a product, and then evolving that product. Obviously not right away, but over time. But Jelly Belly, that was one of the reasons why they had this confidence in hiring me, because I was really proactive and just always coding.
Did they know about that app before you applied? Like, how did they find out about that app that you had built at that bootcamp?
I put it on my resume, and it was live,
Okay.
so I was able to show them. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then, how did you make the move to Maven Link? Like, how did that transition happen?
Well, I knew I wanted to find something closer to home, because Jelly Belly's out in Fairfield, so I was driving, to and from every day, and that was the haul. And so I think I had on LinkedIn just that I was open to positions, and so a recruiter from Maven Link reached out to me, was interested in me, not just because of being an engineer, but because of my background, because they were a startup. They were looking with people with kind of a diverse background. And when I interviewed for whatever position I could get, right? So the junior spot, and I felt like it was just the right fit. I was willing to take anything because I just wanted to be paid to be learning. So I was like, Jelly Belly, sure, I'll go work at Jelly Belly and I'll learn. And I felt such gratitude that I could continue learning this cool thing that I just fell in love with, and be paid to be doing it. It was just, I had tons of gratitude for every opportunity. And I felt like that was part of the puzzle. Like that, it just like I was willing to say yes, even if it wasn't perfect, so.
I've got a question for both of you, because it sounds like you were both able to like continue coding after Dev Bootcamp. In my experience, I was so burnt out after the program finished. I think I took like probably a good month of just like not opening my computer. And I noticed that I had forgotten stuff, so I never recommend that to anybody. But do you have any tricks for after you went through a boot camp to keep up motivation?
One of them is accountability. So I forgot to mention that when I came out of Dev Bootcamp, there was a friend of a friend who wanted to build a prototype for his business, for this idea he had for an app. He said he didn't know how much he could pay me. He didn't know if he could pay me, but would I be willing to build this thing? And I thought, okay, I may as well keep learning. And that was I did that over a few months. So it just really helped to, again, anchor what I'd learned at Dev Bootcamp and build upon what I'd learned. And the accountability piece really made sense, because then I didn't slack off, right? And I really wanted to show this person who, he was a friend of a friend, but someone I knew, and wanted to make sure I was doing right by him. And I ended up making some money at the end, right? Not a lot for the amount of hours I sunk into it, but it was definitely worth the learning opportunity. Yeah, that's my number one. Deadlines.
Yeah, for me, I was burnt out. I mean, I barely slept during that boot camp, probably like 4 to 6 hours a night, which is a really little bit for me. I'm a sleeper. I need like minimum 9 hours sleep to get like function normally. And I went through the whole program with only sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night, even on the weekends. I went ham in that boot camp because for me, I gave up the first time I tried to break into the industry, and I knew I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I just went full blast. I was like, I got to make it this time. So I did that. I did get burnt out. So I took a week off after that boot camp. Like I was like a zombie, caught up with some sleep, didn't open my laptop. I think I did not a week. I think I went like 4 or 5 days without opening my laptop and writing a single line of code. But then after that, during that boot camp, I was lucky. I had a friend who was a Rails developer, and he had started a couple startups before. Um, so he was working on a startup while I was in that boot camp, and he let me live on his couch during that whole time. Because the apartment situation in San Francisco was crazy when I came back from the Peace Corps. Um, like I had lived in San Francisco before I went to the Peace Corps, and I paid like in 2007 or 2008, I forget when I lived. I used to live right by Union Square, up on Powell and Pine. I rented a big bedroom with roommates, but I paid $600 a month for my room. And when I came back from the Peace Corps, it was like triple that amount. So I didn't have, and it was super hard to even find an apartment. So I'm lucky I was here before. I had friends here, and I'm lucky that I have cool friends that will be like, yeah, just crash on my couch for 2 months. um, I mean, I wasn't home that much, so it wasn't that bad. I I didn't come home till like after midnight every day. I think from dev boot camp, and then so yeah, I just went full blast, and then he needed help with his startup, so I kind of felt obligated to help him. Plus, it was fun. I was just building. It was like I was doing a hackathon for like 4 months with my friends. We just hung out all day, just coded and built this real world application. Um, it was like for small businesses to like update their information and everywhere all at once, like in Foursquare, Yelp, wherever their listings were. Our thing was like you come here, you update it, and our thing like updates it everywhere for you. The CEO of that company is actually the CEO of Casper now, the mattress company. Um, so he made a smart move. After like 4 months, he like bailed on this startup to go start working on Casper. Um, my friend that I was building the startup with actually went to go help him work at Casper. And he tried to get me to go, but by that time I had started working at the Map History, which was the first startup that I worked at. So yeah, just having something to hack on. Like my friend needed help, and he helped me. He let me stay on his couch, so I yeah, I just I just did that, and then I just knew I had to keep going to till I got my foot in the door in the industry, which took took a long time. Did that for 4 months. I did a lot of volunteering, a lot of hackathons, a lot of meetups. Um, I just pretended like I was still in the boot camp every day. I was just going hard all day, and then once in a while, I'd take a weekend off just to make sure I don't burn out. But I was pretty determined to like make it work my second time trying to break into the industry.
I think that ended up being my key also. Now thinking back, they had the graduation every 3 weeks as new cohorts would be completing their programs. And the cohort after mine, I went and some companies show up. And there were two founders of a really small startup. And it was kind of the same story of like, we've got this work, we'll give you experience, we'll teach you things, but we can't pay you money. And I heard a lot of people had very differing opinions about it, but I recognized that I needed some sort of accountability, and I started working for them. Learned a little bit of React and had some experience to add to my resume at that point. And so I'm always a little bit hesitant to tell people, yeah, go work for free. But I think it's the accountability that is probably really valuable at that point if you're trying to just get started, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree too. I think when you're first starting out, I don't think, yeah, I think you should just do whatever, even if it doesn't pay. There's probably a controversial opinion. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that once you get your foot in the door, because then you're in demand, and then I mean, if you're gonna work for free, it has to be something that you're passionate about, like some cause that you're interested in helping out or something. But if it's just some random thing and somebody is like, I don't have money, but can you help me? Then I'll be hesitant. But in the beginning, yeah, just having something to work on it helps you build your skills.
Yeah.
That way. But yeah, we don't have any questions today. This is the first time. Usually people, maybe everybody got all their questions out in the past weeks that we've done.
Hi Sam, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, you had a degree in background in CS, but
Hmm.
you couldn't get into the industry at that time. And after attending the boot camp, I think it really helped. So since I'm unaware of what boot camp is, I don't think it's popular over here in India. So would you like help me know what is the teaching methodology adopted in boot camp that helps to adapt better in industry like atmosphere rather than attending a college degree?
Okay. The most important thing I learned at that boot camp is about a growth mindset. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I didn't know what that was until I went to that boot camp, and every single day they were like, growth mindset, growth mindset, growth mindset. um, they like focus. That boot camp was a little different from other boot camps. Their main focus was soft skills. It was weird. It was kind of like a cult. I don't know if you guys agree, Paulette and Brady. I thought their boot camp was kind of cultish. They made us do yoga. Like yoga was mandatory for the first couple of weeks. We had to do these therapy sessions. We had to do these check-ins every day where we had to like let out all our feelings, like no holds barred, anything that was happening at home, even though it was something crazy going on at your household. Um, but in addition to all that, and we had to do all this, learn all this technical knowledge, but they pushed hard growth mindset. And I thought it was fascinating. And after the boot camp, I got deep into the rabbit hole growth mindset. I like read the book that kickstarted this whole idea. I think it was the book that it's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Then I read like Angela Duckworth's book called Grit. So just getting familiar with those topics helped me a lot to just keep pushing forward. The first time when I graduated the university, I just gave up too easily because I didn't have a growth mindset. um, I was like, I'm just not cut out for this. I'm just gonna do whatever job I can do. I didn't feel like I could build applications to university. At least my university was like heavy theory, and I wasn't like a top student in the university. I got by, could like pass the classes and stuff, but I wasn't one of the top students. And since it's a lot of theory, I didn't have a lot of confidence I could build stuff. Um, so when you go to the dev boot camp, not just dev boot camp, any boot camp, it's mostly all practical. You just build applications every single day. Um, from day one at Dev Bootcamp, you were building applications. I mean, our first week was not, we didn't touch the browser until like week 4, but we built apps in the terminal in like our first week. Like we had to build like Sudoku solvers and stuff was our capstone project in our phase 1, which was the end of week 3 in Dev Bootcamp. And it's all in the terminal. It's like nothing in the browser. So just every day building, building, building. I had a lot more confidence that I could build apps. And I started doing hackathons and I would build the app in one day. Like from coming up with the concept and developing a proof of concept in one day gave me a lot more confidence. So that combined with the whole growth mindset concept, it helped me a lot, I think, because like I said, I didn't get my first full-time job till I think it was about a year after I graduated the boot camp when I finally got my first full-time. But it I didn't apply to jobs. So if you've been here the other weeks, my the way I've got all my jobs is all through networking. It's just people referred me to jobs. So even my first job at the startup that I worked at was referred by somebody I met at a meetup that we got along well. I initially met them at the meetup, but then they also went to their boot camp, so they were around for a little while. And I was a mentor at their boot camp. So I mentored a lot of students, and then my network is really big now, just because I volunteered at so many different organizations, did so many hackathons, went to so many meetups, now created my own meetup. So my network just keeps expanding, which makes it easier and easier to get jobs. And so I'm lucky that I don't need to apply to jobs. People just refer me. So even if I'm just looking, I just make a post on social media, like people will be like,
The jobs
yeah,
apply to you.
yeah, people like come interview at my company. So for me, yeah, that was the difference between boot camp and the university. University is all theory, and the boot camps all practical. And then the whole mindset change really helped me, because it can take a while to get your first job, especially when when you're looking in an environment like we're in right now, which is really tough. Just like back when the .com bust was rough too, because we had the .com bust. Like back then, it was crazy too. It was .com bust, 9/11 happened, like all that kind of stuff happened around the time I graduated. So the world was crazy back then. So it goes through these periods of like where it's like really tough to get a job. I mean, it's already tough to get your first job without all this extra stuff going on, but you have to just learn how to just keep going and not give up and keep building your skills, keep meeting people. Yeah.
I have a question for Paulette. Do we want to like just post them in the channel, or is it okay if I use my voice? I wasn't sure like the protocol for the.
There's not that many people here, so you can just, if you're comfortable with just saying the questions on video, go for it.
Hi, Paulette. How are you? So I noticed you have a background in counseling. I was really curious how that past experience has carried over into your roles as a software engineer and as director of engineering at Maven Link. If that's like, yeah, kind of how that carries over today, or does it, or yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, question. It does. It absolutely does. And I didn't understand when I got into engineering just how much I would end up using those skills. So as I've progressed into this recent role, I work with more and more direct reports. Counseling, I was studying counseling and working for a home for young moms with children who were struggling with homelessness or addiction. And the goal to bring them into this home was to help them keep their children in their care. I did that for a number of years. I almost did a master's in counseling back home in Canada. That was going to be my life chosen career. And instead, I did a coaching program through Integral Coaching Canada, which was life-changing for me. It really developed me. And it was like growth mindset and practice, right? And that's another thing I wanted to add to Sam's comments about Dev Bootcamp. One thing that they instilled is this idea of practice. So like always coming to the table to look at what's happening out externally and look at what's happening internally. And I feel like I use my coaching skills every single day in my job. Every single day. So it's whether I'm in my one-on-ones where I'm working with my colleagues who want to be leveling themselves up in their jobs, but in their life as well, I'm using those skills. If I run a group called Maven Diversity that I started at my company, I guess 4 years ago now. Yesterday we had a fabulous meeting that was all about how we're managing the crises that we're seeing around us in the world. And it's a group for people who identify in all different ways to come together and talk. And I facilitate these kinds of meetings because I have the competencies and I guess you would say the comfort to actually step in and have those conversations. So I believe my counseling and coaching skills are like my strength and my power, and my engineering skills are always harder won and take a lot more energy and hard work. So I'm glad I have them both because they're dynamic and interesting to combine in my work today.
Did you include any of that experience on your first resume looking for your junior developer job? Or did you at that point not realize how valuable that would be?
I had no idea. I was just so struggling to just like keep up with the learning. I remember this young woman, Caitlin, who became a friend of mine. She was the first woman director of engineering at Mavenlink. She was so strong technically, and I just like admired her so much. And she's like, you don't give enough credit to your other skills. I think you should be using them more and selling them more with us. And I was like, it never occurred to me to do that because I'm also young professionally. Like I never worked in tech or anything, and the nonprofit world I came from was very different, very different. So it was her just like little shove that made me wake up and realize, oh, I have some real opportunity here. What can I do with this? So I started developing, our culture with feedback. I, did some talks. I spoke at Rails RubyConf on feedback, and I started running programs in the org that were about making feedback a daily part of our work. And even at Dev Bootcamp, that was true too, right? I don't know if in your time they did the feedback part, but like I took that and ran with it and added to it. So yeah, it took a little while, but I wasn't junior when I started using it, no.
We got a question in the Slido. Says, how did you all stay motivated to keep learning without anyone holding you accountable?
So yeah, I struggled with that at first. I really did. And then I found this startup, I think, really was the key. There were maybe 5 of us developers, and we were all pretty much in the same position. We all had just graduated boot camps. That made it a little bit tricky. No one person was able to look at the other person's code and say, hey, this is actually a best practice that you should start implementing. But I had promised them about 10 hours of my time per week, which was very low. And that way I was really concerned with saving time for the job search and saving time for my own personal projects and saving time for going through React courses. And I didn't do enough in any of the work that wasn't actually helping that startup. So I think if I were to go back, I would try to spend more time on that startup, on that project that I was working on with the other people. It definitely offered some level of accountability, but I, as a person, just need the peer pressure of other people to help me be accountable.
Yeah, I think it helps to find something that you're really truly interested in too. It can be anything, whatever you're interested in, you can probably find something to work on that, if you like dogs, you can you can build an app to help other dog lovers. Our guest next week, Eric Nakagawa, back in 2007, I think, he made a blog called I Can Has Cheeseburger, which is world famous now. And I believe it was the first meme generator on the internet. It's before people even started calling memes. Back then, memes were only existed on cat pictures, and it was called LOL cats. Little internet history right here. Memes spawned from this movement that was called LOL cats, and the most famous LOL cat says I Can Has Cheeseburger on it. So I don't think Eric made it. We can ask him next week because he was trying to build his skills. I think he just made it because he thought it was funny. So it was something that interested him. And the crazy thing is it blew up after the first week. I think the traffic started spiking after the first month. I think that they launched the site, he started getting 1 million hits a day or some some crazy stat like that. Maybe not a day, but it spiked big time to the point where 9 months after he launched it, he had made the site with his girlfriend at the time. I think they were still boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. And they sold the site for $2 million, like 9 months after they launched it. In hindsight, that's probably kind of a mistake because I think I Can His Cheeseburger went on to become this like super huge empire that's worth a lot more than $2 million now. But yeah, that's just one example. Just make stuff because you think it's funny or stuff you're interested in. Then that's how you can stay motivated because you're just that's what you like to do. But it also helps to find ways to be accountable too. So you can just do things like I say every week, the 100 Days of Code challenge. That brings accountability because people like see you tweeting, and then if you don't like tweet about it for like a week, somebody might be like, "What happened to the 100 Days of Code challenge?" So just little things like that. You can find ways to like have people on random strangers on the internet hold you accountable.
Yeah, I think your point of really loving what you do is a good one.
Yeah.
And I've noticed I am very motivated when I can help other people. I've been spending a lot of time on projects like this and talking to other junior developers, and I really am motivated to just try to help people get jobs and get through the process that I know was a struggle for me. So right now, especially, there are so many people in need in different ways. I bet there are some pretty creative ways technologically that we could probably be helping people and maybe building tools. So that might be something to consider.
I'll add one quick thing too to that. I agree with all that's been said so far, but also having like a visual of what you want for your future and like spending some time like reflecting on it and sitting in it and feeling it in your body so it becomes this very real, like you can experience it and you know it's possible. And so you stay like connected to that dream or that vision. That's a good thing to do too.
Great point. Oh, Sam is muted.
We got another question in the chat room. I work as a Ruby developer, Ruby on Rails developer in a 3-man team. My boss has no time to be a mentor. He just gives me the tasks and I have to figure out by myself how to finish the task. How or where can I find a mentor to catch up weekly, maybe to go over my code or to get advice where to get better or what books to read next? I would suggest just, I say this every week too, just Twitter is my favorite tool because you can just build relationships with people on Twitter by just follow up. Like if you're doing Ruby on Rails, follow DHH, follow all the top like Ruby developers, Gary Bernhardt, who did Destroy All Software series. They're all like prolific Ruby developers. And if you kind of just form like a Twitter bubble, like when you follow all these people, your feed will like start to be filled with like all these people, all these awesome Ruby developers. And then if you just interact with them, like you can build a relationship. And once you build a relationship, it's easier to ask somebody to be a mentor. It's hard to just like slide into some random person's DMs and be like, "Hey, can you mentor me?" Because they're gonna be like, "I don't even know who you are. Like, I'm busy." But if you develop a relationship first, it's more likely, even if they're busy, maybe they'll carve out an hour a week for you or something like that. So that would be my recommendation.
I can suggest something. I had somebody reach out to me. Well, actually, reach out. It was a friend of somebody who worked with me at my company, And my colleague asked if I'd be willing to have a conversation with somebody who was interested in mentorship. And the way that we ended up working together is he helped me on my volunteer application. So he continued to help me build, like, update it. He put in pull requests to me, and we talk about changes that he was trying to make. And that was a really great experience because I was getting some support to build and maintain the app, but also he was getting the opportunity to learn in an accountable way too. So I guess open source things. This isn't open source, but
that was the open source first popped into my head. If you can find some sort of open source project, a person will be grateful for your contributions on that project, and will hopefully, I mean, obviously they, if it's, well, not obviously, if it's open source, maybe or maybe not, they're doing this in their free time. So to have your help, they're probably going to want to invest in you, and also just make sure that their code gets merged in a way that they want it, like in following good patterns and best practices.
So, yeah, you'll probably learn from just making the PRs. So it wouldn't be like technically a mentorship, but you will learn just because you try to make PRs, and they will maybe make a bunch of comments about like stuff you have to change, or so open source is always a good option.
I also wonder, I know for a long time I was wishing that I could go back and mentor at Dev Bootcamp, but at that point Dev Bootcamp had closed, so I couldn't. And then I tried to mentor at some different boot camps, and I couldn't find a boot camp that was just accepting mentors. So I wonder if you would even just post something, on Twitter or on LinkedIn, like, hey, does anyone know of a person looking for a mentee? You might find someone.
Yeah, I would just post them everywhere, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever social networks you're on. Just ask so people know that you're looking. Because even if nobody in your network is willing to mentor, they might know somebody and they can refer you and connect you with that person. So social media is like super powerful, that you can just like yell into the internet, and maybe somebody will see it and connect you with somebody that you're looking for. But yeah, even so, going to meetups too, meetups like this, more and more are moving online. If we do go back to normal and you can go to meetups in person, that might be a good place to find mentors as well. But I always suggest build a relationship with people first before you just straight up be like, can you mentor me?
There's another question in the chat. What mistakes in your experience, if any, do you think you could have avoided being a junior developer? I think I made a mistake of not asking enough questions. I had terrible imposter syndrome when I first started at my job. And so I kind of felt like asking questions was going to make me look stupid. And it never really clicked until we had another teammate join my team, and she had been working at the company for like 4 or 5 years, but in a totally different department. So it was her first job in tech, and she was asking all sorts of questions because I think she had a little bit more confidence because she did know, well, in general, she just didn't, she had more confidence. And she would sometimes kind of apologetically ask things like, I should know this, and I'm sitting there thinking, no, there's no way you would know this. Of course you need to ask that question. I did not think of her as stupid for asking the question, and I learned a lot from her because of it. I realized that it showed other people that she was actually engaging, and she learned faster than I did because she was asking every single question that popped into her head.
Yes.
Maybe just one thing to add, just when you receive feedback, sometimes in PRs and stuff, it can be kind of harsh. And you might think you're right because you just learned this in your boot camp or whatever. But if a senior developer's telling you stuff, just try and think maybe you're not right. This person has a lot more experience than you. I mean, maybe you are right, depending on who you're dealing with, but generally, in my experience, senior developers have a ton of experience, so they've seen a lot of patterns and they've been burnt by a lot of things that they did wrong. So try and just take their feedback and don't think you're right all the time.
I'm going to add a couple things too. So I agree with the other comments. Two things I'll add are take more breaks. So I remember working so hard, so hard that I wouldn't get up and do anything for hours and hours and hours. And then later on, I took a class through Udemy, I think it was, or Coursera, about learning how to learn. And I remember that one of my teachers at Dev Bootcamp had tried to teach me this, to get me up out of my seat, to go have a cup of tea and relax my brain. And so I'm still learning this, to actually take more breaks, because then the brain goes into diffuse learning rather than focused learning, and you actually have access to more capacity, right? So you figure out problems. Once you get up and walk away, it's like Einstein figuring out the biggest problem in a nap kind of thing, right? Or solving the greatest problem. So that's one thing. And the other thing is something I mentioned already, which said I didn't cash in on the skills that I already had. So I doubted that they were worth anything given I was in this new technical environment, but really you draw on all of the resources you have, not just your technical skills. I wish I had earlier.
Yeah, and that walking away from the computer thing works all the time.
Yeah,
I'll be stuck on a problem for hours, and then I'll just rage quit and go walk to the store. And as soon as I walk out the door, I'm like, oh, I know what's wrong.
Yes, totally. It's kind of comical sometimes. Yeah.
I feel like so many times I had this problem that was in my face. I just couldn't solve it. I figure out sometime that I can talk to somebody about figuring out this problem. And the second I'm explaining it, I'm reading through it again because I had taken that break. Oh, never mind. I know what to do now.
Yes.
There's another question in here. Specifically for Paulette, because there's a 2016 Medium article about pair programming fuels Maven Link's mentorship-driven engineering culture. Is this still the case at Maven Link? And can you talk to the strengths of pair programming? Is it something junior devs should really seek as their first job in engineering?
Yes, and I would say yes. If you have the opportunity to be in a pairing company, then definitely do it. The advantages are enormous. It's difficult too. So I'm going to just start with what's the advantages are to it, which is you learn at such a faster pace because you have someone there with you all the time, noticing when you make mistakes, correcting your logic, trying to introduce you to things that you don't know. And if you're being a brand new engineer, you don't know what you don't know. There's just so much to understand. And so you get just bombarded with things that now you have, you start to build the boundaries of what you don't know, and you understand more about, what you don't know. If that makes sense anyway. So yeah, it's just an incredible opportunity for learning. Maven Link is still a pairing culture. We calibrate that pairing to who's in the seat. And sometimes people need a solo. And that was one of my big ahas was I need sometimes a day to dig into what I'm learning, or it can really mess with me. My confidence can plummet if I'm pairing with somebody and I'm trying to drive, but I just don't know where I'm going. And so, it's 2 computers, 2 screens, 2 keyboards. You're sitting side by side. One person's typing, the other person is there helping to navigate where you're going, but you're constantly talking about what you're doing. So it's incredibly valuable. There's a bit of burnout that can happen if you don't get that time to solo. Maven Link manages this in part by having an afternoon on Fridays where we do project time, so we get to do whatever we want. So that's a great help, so that it's not, we're not pairing 99% of the time. I'd say we're 70% of the time people are in pairs. I didn't know
Yeah.
how great it was going to be. I just sort of landed there, and I feel really blessed that I did.
Yeah, the burnout can be tough. I worked at Pivotal. I only lasted 8 months at Pivotal. They're dogmatic about pair programming, so it's you pair program 100% of the time. You come in, you work 9 to 5 because that's how we can make sure everybody's here to pair. They switch pairs every single day, and it's not super flexible, and like it's really exhausting if you have to do that 100% of the time. Because you have to like it's like you're doing a PR for the whole day where you're just you like sometimes you have a disagreement and you have to just keep going back and forth and the trade-offs of why you want to do it this way and the other person wants to do it that way. Sometimes that can go on for like hours. So there are pluses and minuses to it, but I like how it's part of the culture but not forced upon you to do it all the time. That probably would work better than being forced to pair program all the time.
That's how our culture is at Trunk Club. We are encouraged to pair a lot. There are rooms specifically dedicated for pairing. You cannot reserve those rooms for a conference or anything. And I pair, I mean, in my former position, I was probably pairing once a day, and now I pair maybe like at least twice a week with people. The other day, I pair programmed almost the entire day. It was from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 3:30 or 4 p.m. So it is great to be able, I get to choose who I'm pairing with. That can also kind of make or break a pair session. And yeah, if I also need to make sure that I can pair or I can work on my own, because I think that contributed to my imposter syndrome. When I was at Dev Bootcamp, we did so much pairing. And I would understand what was going on, but I feared that I wasn't actually learning because I wasn't the one suggesting all of the solutions to the problem. So I personally just need time to be able to play with stuff on my own and really wrap my head around it on my own terms.
Yeah. And if you go to keyvalues.com, the site I always talk about that Lynn Tai made, she's also a Dev Bootcamp. I don't know if she finished the program, but she went to Dev Bootcamp. I mentored her. I paired with her a few times. She made a site called keyvalues.com, and I think you can search for like companies that have like a pair programming culture, if I remember correctly. But yeah, is there any other questions for this week? Or should we just wrap up and share? Oh, what is that?
I have one more. Sorry, I thought this started at like 2 o'clock Chicago time. I guess I was wrong. My apologies. My last question was for Paulette again. Sorry, Paulette, I'm like bombarding you right now.
No, it's good.
I saw on your LinkedIn that you're a communication cultivator. And from that same article about Maven Link on Medium, I read that you all do like workshops and lunch and learns and book clubs. And one of those books was one I'm not familiar with, but it's called Nonviolent Communication. And in the article, they talked about how you kind of brought some of those like tenets from that book into the company. I'm just like really curious too, as like someone that's like has a strong background like in communication and like cultivating strong communication. How do you do that within like the engineering organization, and how has that been like brought to the company, I guess?
So yes, one of the ways is to bring books into the org, and we allow anybody who wants to build a group around a particular book to take time to do that, and meet weekly to talk about chapters in the book. It doesn't have to be just technical. So we have at any given time probably one technical and one non-technical book club running at our company. Right now, I think we're doing one on gender and one on design principles. So like we're always adding. So I think we ran a series of books about communication because we were trying to build our culture of feedback, and learning how to form your feedback and deliver those messages well is really key to developing that culture. So nonviolent communication gives some structure to language, which is really helpful. It helps people understand the difference between a need and a feeling. And then it helps people understand how to make really appropriate asks of one another. And I think the other book that was really helpful was Crucial Conversations, because then we start to look at what part we're playing in a difficult experience with our colleagues. Those are two examples that I could think of out of my head. I think most of these efforts came from my desire to build into our culture a process around feedback. My love in life is like growth, and I love growth mindset and this idea that we can really design the life that we want and move towards that over time. So we have to set our sights on something and then know how to break down all of the effort into bite-sized pieces to work step by step towards that endpoint. I like another book called I always forget the beginning. It's about deliberately developmental organizations. I'm forgetting, if you Googled that, you'd probably find it. And this is about bringing development of people into an organization. So not only we just like developing our technical abilities and the things that we were hired to achieve, but also realizing that our life and our work are not really separate. And if we want, we can intermingle them in a way that makes going to work feel like it's a place where we get to be more alive and not like halted and brought down and bored. I like this idea that we can bring it into our offices. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of where a lot of it's coming from.
No, thank you. You really did. I just had a thought too as well. Do you think that in researching and learning about like crucial communication, like better communication skills, that the pair programming like lends itself to that even more so, or it makes pair programming even more effective when those tenets are kind of really held in place?
Yes. Right now, my company's working on a blog post for a team that went through some hard communication struggles. And it wasn't because they didn't want to work well together. It's because they weren't hearing one another the right way. So some of that would come out in pairing, and some of it would come out in one-on-ones. And everybody involved was really desperately wanting for this like evolution of the team to happen just through being able to communicate better. And by bringing this idea of feedback to different one-on-ones with different people and helping them process like their own, what they were bringing to the table, like the baggage they brought with them, which would block them from seeing the pure intent from somebody else, or, these are just simple examples, but they ended up being able to move through this issue and like come out the other side of it such a strong team. Like that's why we're going to write about it, because their work around this was so profound. And that wasn't technical work. That was learning the soft skills and learning how to like be vulnerable and talk to people and be honest about, okay, maybe I'm not hearing you the right way. And I think that's because I came from this background, and like just really powerful stuff to get to be a part of in a technical, organization.
That's so interesting to hear about. I know our company is trying to introduce a culture where people can give feedback, because we don't really have any sort of, like, nobody gives or receives feedback right now. And I know that it caused some significant issues, and we realized it was something that we were going to have to incorporate. Did everyone, like, how did you get buy-in from people?
It took a while, I wasn't an expert. Like I feel like more of an expert now, but when I first started learning about feedback, I wasn't an expert. I had, already done some work around how to communicate well and listen well, and that's a big part of good feedback, is being able to listen as well, and learn how to not receive something with a defense up, right? But just like let it land. I think Sam already talked about that in relation to reading PR comments. So I did it in sort of phases. I did a presentation at the organization. Then I went and did a talk at a couple of different technical conferences. And then as I've got into engineering management and directorship, I have more opportunity to influence more people. So I kicked off some initiatives that were with all of our coaches going directly to their direct reports and asking for feedback on the areas of growth that they were interested in. So making it very personal. But we also have all of the coaches at our company, every month they go out and they get feedback from the community for their coachees. And the idea is all steeped in growth mindset. It's not about telling somebody they're doing shitty work. It's about helping people recognize where they could just continue to excel, or to see where they're already excelling. And so we've been strategic about inserting these efforts a few times into the culture a year. So we're always thinking about it. We're always talking about it. You know, it's part of our onboarding process. It's part of how we set up pairing. I wish it was happening more through pairing, to be honest. That's my goal, that it be like an everyday kind of thing between pairs. But at the very least, managers should be giving feedback to their direct reports every month based on what the community is offering them. And then we just kicked off another feedback effort, which is all of us now are going peer-to-peer. So we're developing our own questions, and we're going to have conversations with one another about, you know, what we want to be learning about ourselves, and hearing from others how they see us and our work. So there's a lot of like sprinkling of efforts so that it's always in our awareness and our consciousness to be working on it.
Wow. I posted a book. I wonder if it's the one you were talking about.
Everyone culture. I always forget that first part. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
Link is not that. I just want to mention, like, we're not a deliberately developmental organization, but there are aspects of it at our company.
And I checked keyvalues.com. Pair programming is on there. There's currently 4 companies on there that have pair programming culture. GitHub is one of them, and they have 16 open positions.
Wow.
And they have a strong remote culture. It says 65% remote global positions at GitHub. There's also Gusto, which is HR company, which is it's a pretty big startup, and a couple other companies I haven't heard of. Yeah, if you're interested in looking up, that's an easy way to find companies that pair programming culture. Pivotal is another one. There's Pivotal Labs and Pivotal Cloud Foundry, but like I said, just know that they're more dogmatic about it. It's like they expect you to pair program all the time, and you don't choose who you pair with, you switch every day. And they do 100% TDD too. So they have like a dogmatic idea of like how software should be built. So just keep that in mind if you want to check out Pivotal. But yeah, is there any other questions, or should we wrap it up? No questions? You can share your LinkedIn. I think a lot of us are connected already, but here's my LinkedIn too, if you want to connect, if we're not already connected. And does anybody know if SpaceX launched? People who came in later.
Yeah. This is Ashley in Kansas City. They did. It was successful. It was pretty cool to watch. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to watch the replay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And thanks to Paulette for joining us this week.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
And yeah,
thank you so much.
good conversation. And next week we have Eric Nakagawa, who right now is the head of open source at Calibra, which is it's an open source wallet for Facebook's Libra cryptocurrency that's launching probably this year or next year. Maybe. We'll see if the regulators try and stop it again. I think it's really going to launch this time. But he has a long history working in startups in the Bay. He's kind of mentored me throughout my whole career. He's the person I always go to for negotiation advice, for just any advice, like should I go work at this company or not? Like one time I had a couple different offers and he helped me kind of decide what I should go with. So he has a lot of knowledge to share. And he's just cool because he's the inventor of iCanHaveCheeseburger.com. So that's next Saturday at noon, and then we'll try to find more guests for the weeks following that.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to sort of actually let people on the line know I'm actually working on a coaching practice on the side. My website is not live yet, but one thing I'm going to do is offer some pro bono, like some volunteer coaching spots for people as I start to develop the business. I'm a professionally certified coach, and I think now that I've been in the industry for a while, it's something I want to keep doing. So just want to put it out there. If you are connected to me on LinkedIn and you reach out and you're interested, maybe we could work together in the future. But don't spread it too far because I won't have that many spots.
And then I was just thinking last time, I thought it was great that we were able to stop recording and then a few more people were more willing to join in the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording right now. And if people would like to introduce themselves, they are more than welcome to. Here we go. It always takes me a minute. Confirm.